both the facilitator and the first speaker. And we are joined by Annette Hupschler and Giovanni Russo. I will say it again towards the end of the panel, but from the start, I would like to thank my other two panelists for their participation in the panel. And I would also very much like to thank the organizing team of the conference. Without your guidance, the WhatsApp group, the test calls, we wouldn't have been so, let's say, relaxed. It would have been an added level of anxiety. So with your assistance, we can go into this panel discussion with great ease. Thank you very much. I will first of all give a short introduction to the panel, and then I will also introduce all of the speakers in the way that we will present our short papers. We will have 15 presentations. We will have 15 minutes each. But yeah, let me introduce our discussion today. As I've mentioned, the topic, organized crime and the use of the internet. This little brief, we compiled that together as a panel. The internet has transformed the operational landscape for organized criminal groups, enabling them to expand and streamline their illicit activities across borders with unprecedented efficiency and reduced risk of detection. The digital environment provides these networks with advanced tools and new pathways to conduct illegal activities, from trafficking drugs, weapons, and endangered species to exploiting vulnerable individuals through human trafficking networks. Illegal marketplaces facilitate transactions, while social media platforms serve not only as coordination hubs, but also as recruitment channels, drawing in new members and amplifying networks. Given the complex and evolving interplay between organized crime and the digital platforms, it is critical for researchers, policymakers, and law enforcement agencies to deepen their understanding of how organized crime exploits the internet. This panel will explore the challenges and possibilities of combating these activities, highlighting innovative investigative strategies and emphasizing the importance of international collaboration to counter the growing influence of organized crime in the online sphere. Okay, so my name is Dr. Derika Lambrechts, and I'm a senior researcher, senior lecturer at the Department of Political Science at Stellenbosch University. Reason for me also being here, I'm also researching organized crime, environmental organized crime, and specifically gangs on an area known as the Cape Flats in Cape Town, South Africa. The title of my presentation will be Online Geographies of Gang Content on TikTok, originating from Cape Town, South Africa. Our second panelist is Dr. Annette Hupschler. The title of her presentation, Online Platforms as Enablers of Wildlife Trafficking. Dr. Annette Hupschler is a Chief Research Officer in the Global Risk Governance Program at the University of Cape Town. She leads the Environmental and Planetary Futures Research Group at GRG and also acts as a Senior Fellow at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. Her current research focuses on the governance of safety and security, with a specific focus on illegal wildlife economies, restorative justice, and environmental futures, as well as the interface between illicit and licit economies and criminal networks. Our third speaker will be Professor Giovanni Russo. The title of his presentation, Organized Crime, Physical and Virtual Space. Giovanni Russo is a criminal law researcher with particular attention to anti-mafia legislation and new technologies. His studies addresses the relationship between cybercrime, organized crime, and business activity. And he also researched understanding how mafias use the cyberspace to promote preventative expressive tools. And he's also a scholar at the Luis Guido Carli University. Okay, now I just have to, because I'm the facilitator as well, I just have to time myself, and then we can start with the presentations. Okay, and let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, I hope that's visible by all. Please let me know if there is a problem, but I think we're good to go. Okay, so the title of this presentation and the paper that I published, Gangsters Are Cowards, # Merchants Are Killers, and # Save Our Kids, Online Geographies of Gang Content on TikTok, originating from Cape Town, South Africa. Okay, so as most of us will know, social media created novel ways to interact and communicate, and this space has also spilled over into the milieu of gangs. So what I tried to do with this particular study, I wanted to involve social media, and initially I thought that I will make use of 3, maybe even 4 social media platforms, and that would be Facebook, X formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, and then maybe also Instagram. But while I started to do research on this topic, I realized that there's really a lack of research done on the interplay between social media and gangs or organized crime in South Africa and also the African context. And therefore, I decided to limit it for an initial study, exploratory study, to one particular social media platform. And for that platform, I selected that platform to be TikTok. Reasons why I selected TikTok. Africa is regarded as a priority market for the app. And unlike some governments around the world, especially in the United States, no African country have moved to monitor or ban the app. We will also see, I think in South Africa, I did a quick search this morning, we have more than 17 million users of TikTok within South Africa, and it's also growing. It's the fastest growing app within the African context, making the study of gang content and organized crime content on the platform quite relevant. Now, I'm sure that most of you will be familiar with TikTok, but as with other social media platforms, the following feed is not the heartbeat of the app, but it's rather the proprietary recommendation system, so the For You page. And that's also the landing page when you go into TikTok. We can talk about the app a little bit in the Q&A. I'm not going to say too much about it, but as most of you will know, if you have younger children, TikTok, the app itself rewards hyperactivity. So the more you scroll, the more you get from the algorithm will keep on feeding you and feeding you and feeding you with the content that you serve. The clips are also short, so this ephemeral nature of the particular clips make it also very addictive, and it has been described in literature as digital crack cocaine. Again, making the study of TikTok and gangs quite relevant at this moment. Okay, so what I tried to do with this particular research, I wanted to limit one particular geographical area, and I wanted to see how that particular geographical area, the physical space, how the physical space spills over into the virtual realm. So the question that I grappled with, that I tried to answer, how is gang-related content linked to the geographical space of Cape Town, South Africa, formulated and depicted on TikTok's For You page? So gang-related content, because this is an exploratory study, it wasn't only about what the gangs are doing on TikTok. It was all material related to gang content. So I divided it into a dichotomous observation of virtual material. So the first one would be material either directly connected with a gang or associated with any aspect of gang. So that's direct due to association. So that would be your what your gang members pose, criminal activity, etc. And the second one would be content and conduct initiated because of the existence of gangs. So that's secondary due to existence. And this will be your community interaction, your rehabilitated gangsters, maybe some safety and security. I thought in the initial part of the study, if we can maybe get South African Police Service or crime intelligence, so that would fall into the second category of my dichotomous observation. I do briefly want to say something about the method that I used if we research online geographies of gang content on TikTok. This is also something we can discuss again in the Q&A. So the method, of course, will be digital observation or digital ethnography. And then, as I've said before, the unit of analysis that I selected for this particular study was the short videos on the For You page, or the content posted on the For You page. So what I did in order to get access to this, some of you may know that you don't need an account in order to view material on TikTok, but I did create an account, but I did not have any interaction or interventions with the content creator, and that's another reason why I selected TikTok. So as I say, I think it's this slide or the next, the next point. It was a one-way mirror analogy. So I could see what the user or what the content creator is doing, but the content creator did not see me. There is a plethora of literature, and it's a upcoming field which is quite fascinating about the ethics of studying online behavior in that particular matter. Because of the fact that TikTok and the material on TikTok is in the public realm, I regarded it that it can be used. However, I did get ethical clearance for the research. Very important, and I think this is it's an essential caveat if we work with social media. Just because the material and the content that you use for your research is publicly available, it does not take anything away from the ethics of the research. And I say there at the last one, it doesn't exclude the responsibility of the researcher to respect the fundamental principles of ethical research and good practice. And that needs to be modeled in studies using social media, even though the material is publicly available. So before I move on to the next slide, as I've mentioned, I created an account, and I would then observe material related to gang content. So the research process started, and this was the pilot part of the study, started with training the For You page, or starting to train the algorithm in order to provide me with material of gang-related content. So because my geographical space and the geographical space that I work in, that was one area known as the Cape Flats, and to contextualize that, it's an area where during the apartheid era, that was created during the apartheid era, a specific ethnic group in South Africa, racial group in South Africa, the colored communities, they were moved from the inner city of Cape Town to this out to the outskirts of the city, in what then became known as an area of the Cape Flats, with limited socioeconomic development throughout the years, and hence we saw the increasing presence of gangs and the rise of gangs and gang violence. This area is also then one of the most violent areas within South Africa. So what I did to train the For You page was to take Cape Flats and then use search words such as gangs, gang-related violence, the name of particular vigilante groups that operate in the area, gangs and communities. And in that way, I programmed the algorithm to provide me with gang content. So from the pilot, I identified 5 categories of communication. So 1, community interaction. That would be what the community is saying about gangs. 2, notions of criminality. So that would be actually depicting acts or criminal acts. Then 3rd, gang culture. 4, police security involvement. And 5, life in prison. Oh, and 6, excuse me, rehabilitation, life outside the gang. So that will be posts made by ex-gang members not actually being physically active in gangs anymore. So I created a digital field diary. So what that means is that it was a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, where for each video that I watched, I did not record any of the videos, but what I did was I record, as in save any of the videos. I recorded the information or the content of the videos, the duration, the themes, the number of likes, the hashtags, and any relevant comment related to the clip. It is impossible to start to talk about something like a sample size for the particular research because you don't really know the size of your sampling frame, and therefore when I reached the level of saturation, as in when I saw the same themes in the categories of communication repeating itself, I then concluded my research. I spent about 55 hours within the digital field, recording more than 170 of these particular videos. So let me get to findings. So online geographies of gang content on TikTok. The first one was that I looked at, as I've mentioned, category of communication, community interaction. So what we see here, let's move to the right of my screen. This was a particular vigilante group that was very prominent during the time that I did my digital field work. I, of course, in order to, relating back to the research ethics, I tried to anonymize it and not to make anyone try to take out some of the information. So basically the group, this particular vigilante group, will take videos of them marching to the houses of known gangsters, shouting quite violent slogans. I have an example there. We don't ask you to stop, we demand you to stop. We will be more peaceful. If the drug dealers are dead, 1 bullet, 1 gangster. So these violent slogans will be shouted while they will be making the video and while they march to the houses of gangsters. And then the other thing that's important to note is that they also actually mention the name of the gangster within on the recording of it. And as you can see, quite a number of likes that it received. It also gave the name of the vigilante group, and quite violent messages. And this particular digital activism became very prominent and was a very, very prominent theme while conducting the research. It relates back to the marginalized history of communities of the Cape Flats, the colored communities. It went together with hashtags Colored Lives Matter, hashtag Brown Lives Matter. So really spilling over taking the geographical marginalized history of the community and displaying that on the virtual space, very much using the app in order to frame identity politics. Important to say that this particular, in this particular category of communication, it was more of recording of the videos, thus the interactive nature of the app wasn't used when dealing with this category of communication. Quickly, the second one, notions of criminality, it was a very interesting one. What was quite prominent was gang shootings and recording of gang shootings. As you can say, that's the first one that I have there. Of course, you couldn't identify the individuals, you couldn't identify the faces, but what happened a lot of times within this category of communication was that they will give the location. So in this one, we see Mannenberg, it was Bischofslavers, Hanover Park, so it will definitely be the geographical space will again transfer to the virtual space, and it will be live content that will be recorded again and then posted. And as you can see there, they also indicated, yeah, as I've mentioned, the areas as well. This also again spilled over into the marginalized communities, as we see the normal day in Elsies River, which is another area that's like in the ghetto, civil war on the Cape Flats, they took our people and dumped them there. And I felt, I got a sense that to be part of the virtual community gains sympathy for the virtual realm from a local physical reality. The second one, a quick comment on that. I did pick up some, how can I say, obvious instance of criminality. This one was this particular screenshot that I took. These are a group of men. They poached abalone. Abalone is a rare sea mollusk that you find off the coast of Cape Town, basically extinct because of the poaching. Poachers will take it and then what used to be sell it to Chinese triads. So that's again relating back to other notions of crime and criminality depicted on the virtual space. I did not block out the faces here. That was the true screenshot. So whoever posted this realized that they probably need to block their faces in order to make them anonymize them. I did also come across a few instances of dealing in drugs. Of course, that needs to be quite. You need to go into the post itself. For example, cocaine will be represented by a snowflake emoji, and then the emoji that you will also see to be used will be the 2-point plug, because that relates to a drug dealer. So that took some time in order to decipher what it is that is going on. Last thing that I would like to just say is the depiction of gang culture. I will just, if I can talk you through the clip or the screenshot there, you'll see Ghetto Fabulous. The numbers that you see there, #7945, that relates, that's a postal code. So that immediately also, again, in the virtual space, it takes us back to the postal code of where the picture was taken. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that was Bonteheuwel. Again, you see also the hashtag just for kids. So meaning that they're getting, this particular one was posted by a youth gang. So again, the hashtag just for kids trying to get traction from children, young users of the app. So there was definitely this depiction of gang culture being very glamorous, chains, hand signs and signals, the glamorous side of gangs. Then to conclude, maybe I should conclude with the other categories of communication. They were not that prominent. I did not get that much material. I can say a bit more on that later. But the most two prominent, the one promoting gang culture, as in the glamorization of gang culture, and the other one fighting it, which was the Vigilante group. What I do want to stress is that the gang culture one, there's definitely a process of digitalization of gangs, and they are having a larger and larger footprint on TikTok. There are more and more content being posted. And then with regards to community interaction, there's definitely the process of digital activism, where the app is used to demonstrate social injustice and demands for social change. Okay, my time is up. There was a very broad overview, so I'm going to just stop my screen share, stop my time. And because I'm also the facilitator, I now need to immediately go into introducing Annette. Annette, I did give you an introduction. I think for time reasons, you can start with your presentation.
Right. Just to make sure, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to talk about online platforms as enablers of wildlife trafficking. But let me first start off with a little slide. I used to do a lot of research on rhino poaching. And usually when I start talking about the new area, one of the new areas that I'm working on, succulents, I ask people what are the commonalities between the two species. And you will be quite surprised that quite a lot of people don't actually know the species on what is my left-hand side, I suppose yours as well. So these are small succulents that are endemic to a specific region in the Northern Cape. And they're actually more threatened than the rhino. Some of these species have gone into functional extinction in the last few years. So it's been quite a journey. But before I go into more details about succulents, I just want to speak a little bit about the general change with regards to the internet and its connections to organized crime and illegal markets. So basically, the internet has transformed the operational landscape for organized criminal networks massively in the last decade or so. And it has enabled organized crime networks to expand with unprecedented efficiency and reduced risk of detection. So there are many, many examples from a number of criminal markets where we've seen just increased efficiency. There are also trust issues that have been dealt with and just reduced risk all around for organized crime networks. So what is so special about these new technologies, especially in the realm of organized crime? So basically, technology is not just a tool, but also an agent that influences the structure and functioning of illegal value chains. This is me, the sociologist, speaking. So this is basically just to say that technology has become super important in terms of markets and organized crime networks. Then technologies are also a facilitator. So the use of technologies enhances communications, logistics, quality control, and transactions in illicit value chains. So a good example, for example, would be that if you have a product at the source, organized crime networks cannot always be sure that that same product arrives at the consumer end or the trade end of the market. And technologies have enabled new checks and balances that organized crime networks can use. Then new technologies are also enforcers. Of course, it provides many tools for law enforcement and criminal justice actors to detect and counter illegal activities. So there are different algorithms, AI, scrapers that are being used by the criminal justice system. Then the new technologies can also be influencers. I always call them influencers. Basically, they can shape market dynamics, affecting supply and demand, pricing, and market accessibility. I think Dereka's presentation quite nicely showed how much influence there can be on social media platforms like TikTok, where hashtag can just go viral. When you sort of look at contraband products in the sphere, a product can pretty much go viral within minutes. I see that one of my PhD students is on the call as well, and she's looking at puff adder trade at the moment, and it is really, really interesting to see how all sorts of products are being marketed on the internet via social media and other platforms. New technologies can also be disruptors. So basically, AI technologies are innovating, self-replicating, and improving all the time. Of course, there's a huge question of who's in control and, do we regulate, don't we regulate, what governance systems are being employed. Then new technologies can also be intelligences or intelligence gatherers. So basically, they can be used to gather information on people, things, and flows. I don't really need to talk too much about the power of these new technologies, but in the criminal sort of sphere, the digital marketplaces that are being used, mostly anonymous trading platforms, but we also see a lot of use of so-called legitimate channels, so social media platforms, WhatsApp, WeChat are also being used to trade contraband. And there's increasingly the use of cryptocurrencies. So that is a secure, anonymous payment method, which obviously enables criminal activities. And then we do have encrypted communications. So there's secure channels for illegal traders to communicate, which obviously enables business interactions and makes it easier to stay in touch. Let me move over now to succulents. So succulents, these little beautiful plants, have become extremely coveted in the last 5 years. There has been a huge uptick during COVID-19, actually. And I think it was largely linked to us all being locked up inside, and people felt like they wanted to connect to nature. So a lot of people started adopting new pets, or some people just bought plants. So there has been a massive uptick. And I've been doing field work with people, communities, and harvesters on succulent succulent poaching. But I've also been focusing on the digital interface and the consumer end. I first want to give you a bit of information on what's happening at the source. So these plants are often in very far remote areas, very dry, arid areas. In South Africa, they're mostly in the Northern Cape and Western Cape region, but you will find them across Southern Africa. So Namibia, Botswana, most countries have succulents, and are also increasingly reporting an uptick of illegal harvesting. There's an interesting disconnect that for lots of people that are harvesting or picking these plants, they don't necessarily regard it as a crime. There has been sort of a history of use of succulents. Of course, now we're looking often at industrial scale harvesting, where doing one poaching operation, a whole endemic population of species could be rendered extinct because they're literally in one specific area only. And talk a little bit about contested illegality, which directly follows up from the notion that we cannot eat conservation, or it shouldn't be a crime to pick plants. So we found in the succulent space there's a huge disconnect between what's illegal in conservation and what is socially legitimate. So often conservation rules don't reflect what people do in real life. A lot of people also feel that the laws are unfair and they don't respect local practices, and they create tension. What is also quite interesting is in the sphere, we don't just see local people that live near plants being co-opted. The range of actors that are engaged in succulent trafficking, and I'll get to that in more detail a bit later. Why do people poach succulents in the first place? It's often financial, economic reasons. There has been recruitment from criminal networks. So it's quite interesting. Derica mentioned abalone poaching earlier. There have been some loose connections between other criminal networks and the networks operating now out of the Northern Cape and Western Cape. So some crime convergence. There's also a lot of, after COVID, we've just seen a lot more economic destitution of people. So people have no other way to put bread on the table. And I just wanted to quickly give you an idea how bad the situation is. We all know that COVID-19 started in late 2019, and there was already a fair amount of poaching, or if you want to call it harvesting of succulents happening in the late 2010s. But there was a massive uptick during 2021, 2022. And we've also seen an uplisting, so-called uplisting of conophytums. That is a specifically coveted species of succulents. So there have been a lot more species uplisted, red listed. The IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, has specific lists that basically talk about the level of imperilment or endangerment of plant species. So you can see a massive change from 2019 to 2022. What is quite interesting about the succulent trade is that a lot of it is happening online and a lot of it is legal. And I think we often see that in wildlife trades, that we have illegal and legal and sub-legal flows that are happening. I've posted here pictures of completely legal websites, so there's nothing untoward in these on these websites. These are all species that are legally available in South Africa. Some of them are exported, are available for export, and they're easily propagated in nurseries. What is quite interesting, though, is that we found that some nurseries have been involved in illegal trade. So they will be basically laundering wildly harvested plants and trading them to consumers and clients abroad, which is quite awful. I mentioned conophytums earlier. So conophytums are very small button-like succulents, and they have become particularly popular, especially in consumer countries like Japan, China, and South Korea. And some of the older stock can go for huge amounts of money. It's unbelievable. People in South Africa will often get 3-4 rand a plant, which is peanuts. It's 20 euro cents. It's very, very little. But on the consumer side, people pay a lot of money for it. And what is quite interesting is that collectors don't go for perfectly formed succulents. They're often like gnarly looking, strange looking plants that are special, that look different. And social media has been a facilitator along the supply chain. So I've spoken to illegal harvesters in Northern Cape that told me that they've been approached by WhatsApp. They've also WeChat. So there are different social media channels that are being used to connect harvesters directly with buyers, which is quite interesting, because that means that the supply chain has been substantively shortened. Usually you have a long sort of supply chain where on one end you see purchase, and then you have intermediaries, brokers, traders. And with succulents, it's often only 1 or 2 steps, two steps from the purchaser to the actual consumer of these plants. They're also quite interestingly, TikTok, Derek, TikTok is also quite a big sales platform for succulents, but also more the conventional Facebook and Instagram, where people just can subscribe. There are also specific collectors societies that will also put you in touch with someone that might have the plant that you're seeking.
Annette, my apologies. It's 2-3 minutes.
Thank you. There's often the plants are transported via postal services, so short supply chains, and often the harvesters also double up as transporters. So you will find that a harvester in the Northern Cape will actually transport the succulents to someone in Cape Town, an intermediary or broker of sorts that will send it to the buyer, or the buyer is already connected to intermediaries. Let me move on. Very interesting is that beyond harvesters in the Northern Cape and Western Cape, we've actually seen a very interesting situation where senior botanists and police officers are alleged to be have been involved in criminal networks that are basically moving succulents from South Africa to consumer countries. Yeah, this is ongoing. A court case will be heard later this year, but quite important to note here that beyond the usual suspects that we look at, nurseries, botanists, and police officers are involved or appear to be involved. My final slide, Derica, I'm just going to quickly go across that. So basically, technologies have been used to disrupt and control illegal wildlife trade. We know of drone surveillance, which is largely used in protected areas. It's very expensive. But what has been quite useful is the use of artificial intelligence, AI, that scrapes the internet. There's some really interesting projects on the go. One is called Flora Guard, where basically AI identifies fraudulent sites that sell succulents and other illegal wildlife products. I think what is quite important is to leverage technology and intelligence gathering to disrupt these organized crime networks. It's very important to have public awareness and coordinated actions. I see peers missing. Policymakers and researchers should work together and leverage global resources and knowledge. That's my presentation. This is what AI gave me as the perfect solution to our problems. So AI is not as advanced as we might want to think. So a world where succulents, rhinos, and people are living together and there's no technology other than the AI image. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Annette. I'm not going to say too much, but I think what stands out is the double-edged sword of AI and advancements in technology. It's both used as something which complicates our lives, as in increase the crime, but we also need to use it in order to combat the crime. I hope we can unpack that a little bit more in the Q&A. Giovanni, I'm going to give over to you. Please, if you can start your presentation.
Okay, yes, but I don't have a slide because now is researching and it's impossible to me share topics. Okay, I speak. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Derica and Annette, for your interesting presentation. And hello, everyone. It is an immense honor for me to be present in this conference and to have the opportunity to discuss with each of you. And so thank you. Above all, allow me to thank the organizational governance of all entities involved in the organization of this wonderful event, which both in qualitative and quantitative terms represent one of a kind event. My name is Giovanni Russo. I come from Formicola, a small town among the green wonders of Alto Casertano in the Campania region. Campania on my father's side and Lucanian on my mother's side. I have always had a visceral interest in the mafia phenomenon, and although fascinated by the sociological aspect of the subject, I have, however, dedicated my studies to substantial and procedural aspect of criminal event, of criminal prevention and fight against organized crime. In this sense, in fact, I graduated, specialized and mastered in criminal law at the Suor Orsola Benincasa University, and developing the thesis first on the infiltration of Camorra clans in the Campania health system, and then on the use of virtual currencies for money laundering purpose. In this regard, I was able to perfect my study at the State University of Milan, Statale di Milano, where I followed the specialization course in international scenarios of organized crime, concluded with a thesis entitled "The Mafias in the Digital Area." And now I am currently a PhD in law and business at Lewis University in Rome, which with a research project entitled Mafia, Corruption and Business, Preventing and Countering Public and Private Corruption through Corporate Integrity toward a New Global Governance and Cybersecurity System. This is precisely the point I would like to focus my speech on, which, as I will explain shortly, arises from an Italian case, Land, and which try to answer a fundamental question. Can the figure of ethical hacker be used to counter the spread of organized crime in cyberspace? This is the question. The facts are a part of a development context of a company project relating to a smartphone application. From reading the provision, it seemed the agent, enjoying considerable technical skill, had illegally entered the company system, acquiring information the application through which he would have identified the bugs. After having warned the company so that it could fix them, and after having waited it in vain for their direct feedback to resolve the system's vulnerabilities, he would have decided to make this technical error known to the public. And in particular, the judge, they made it appropriate to frame this fact within the common methodology of responsible disclosure to ensure consumer protection. Behind the technical system, from a criminal perspective relating to the specific case, to the concrete method used to illegally access the computer system, and which system, as well to the interpretative question regarding the constituent element of the incriminating fact. This affair raises significant food for truth of the relevance attributed to the so-called responsible disclosure and ethical hacking, with a view to a necessary balance between the need for protection, including criminal, of interest of public and private relevance. The first question of my research is to define who is the ethical hacker. The second is how to frame criminally the responsible disclosure. And in this framework, what role can responsible disclosure play? And finally, if it's necessary, balancing public and private interest. About the first question, briefly, the ethical hacker is the subject driven by the need to know and understand the technology with malicious purpose of aimed and causing prejudicial effect to data, information, program or system, or to illegally acquire such data and information. Of course, among the ethical rules should also be included the sharing of knowledge and information itself. But the discovery of possible vulnerabilities and criticalities should be oriented by intent to improve cybersecurity structure and cybersecurity governance. For further information, I refer to a volume by Raul Chiesa and Silvio Ciappi, in which an attempt is made to identify the basis on which to build a profiling methodology applicable to the world of hacking. The second question, how to frame criminally the responsible disclosure, In order to address this issue relating to the criminal relevance of the activities attributable to the latter, it is necessary to define first of all the responsibility disclosure. This is a practice to campaign can adopt, according to which if a user or a researcher discover a vulnerability in a product, they are invited to inform the manufacturer. If a certain period of time passes without the company providing feedback, and they may feel legitimized to make the discovered vulnerability to the public. It seems indisputable that this practice can, in fact, be useful one hand to manufacturers who are put in a position to resolve the critical issue of a product, and on the other hand to consumer who can purchase qualitatively better and safer products. Secondly, on a strict penal level, it appears quite evident that with 615 Article ter CP, the legislator intended to sanction the abusive access to a computer or telematic system with the actual knowledge of that information, the nature of the letter, and not even the motivation that moved the hacking subject, which may affect eventually the measuring of the penalty, not having any relevance for the purpose of the commission of the offense. Thirdly, if we look at international and European search, both 2001 Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime in the Article 2 and the European Directive 2013 number 40 on attacks against information system, Article 3, adopt the same approach, substantially in line with the political criminal choice of the Italian legislator made with the law 547 of 1993, which introduced the section 15 ter into the criminal code. The third question, in this framework, what role can responsibility disclosure play between special unworthfulness and non-punishability? An unauthorized access to a system carried out to verify the presence of vulnerabilities or criticalities, which is followed by the post factum of the responsible disclosure in order to ensure consumers greater protection in terms of product safety, constitute two segments of the agent's activity that must be kept clearly distinct. In short, the fact that a business entity adheres to and encourages responsible disclosure does not mean that in order to implement it, it authorizes illicit access to its IT systems, its technological resource, or its product. Either such disclosure, therefore, fall within the requirement of special unlawfulness, influencing its full configuration, or a non-conditioned exploratory circumstance, or in general a condition of non-punishability is found, if it aims to solve IT security problem, thus also preventing cyber incident that could involve interest of public relevance. And finally, it could operate on the level of subjective element as an element to support a defensive hypothesis that has the objective of demonstrating the lack of intent. Now, the final problem is to balance public and private interest in this case. The protected legal interest is characterized by a private dimension and a public collective dimension. The first is identified with the interest in the exclusivity of access to one or more computer space, and regardless of the nature of the program's data and information stored therein, as well as their viability with respect to illegitimate interference by third parties. The second refers to a super individual or collective interest, is ensuring that access to computer system and the network itself occurs for legitimate purpose and in a manner that is regular for the safety of users. Today, taking into account European and supranational search, the concept of cybersecurity can only be conceived as a comprehensive concept, as a proactive and reactive project aimed precisely at the ideal protection of the interest of men and organization to be from thirds, especially thus to its essential core worthy of protection, so-called GI-TOC, the triad of confidentiality, integrity, and available of system, program, data, and information, CIA triad, to which can be linked the need to protect the viability of computer system, network data, and information contained therein or processed through them. For the purpose of the configurability of the criminal offense under Section 615-ter of the Criminal Code, therefore the violation of the voluntas domini and of the use assumes primary relevance to be excluded alias of the owner of the computer system, regardless of the reason of the acting subject and or the nature of program, data, or information stored or processed in the computer system, or the result of consequence of the fact. In conclusion, therefore, I hope I have been able to now convey the importance of defining a regularity framework at a national and supranational level, where such gaps can be contained, whether they are organization concerning the method and timing of the responsible disclosure, and the criminal framework of the new time of crime, as well as the clear identification of exculpatory or expecting circumstances, as in the case of the ethical hacker. And this is my presentation, and I hope to can I have another possibility after 3 years to share my doctoral thesis on this case. Thank you very much all. Very interesting conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giovanni. First of all, I don't know how you did it, but you did it at exactly 15 minutes. It is significantly impressive. Second, also, thank you very much for providing an introduction to a field which I'm not familiar with. So I'm hoping that you can unpack it a little bit more for us in the question session. So let's move on. I would like to invite our participants and attendees to please post questions in the Q&A, and I will then read it out to our panelists, and they can then respond. We do have one question so far from Melissa, and this was during my presentation. She asks, Derek, any incidents of wildlife crime? So Melissa, I'll quickly answer that, and then I'll pop it over to Annette, since this also falls in her realm, and she also mentioned it. And after that, I have a question for Giovanni, but let me deal with this one. Melissa, yes, I've mentioned the one example of abalone, but a word of caution when working with social media, from my experience, and as I've said, Annette, please weigh in on this, is that because of the incredible scale of social media, it's so difficult it's like you're looking, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to find it. So my first recommendation is that if you would like to research wildlife crime and incidents of wildlife crime on social media, you have to be specific on where to look. So for example, in my case in TikTok, I looked for general criminal activity, so that included all levels of wildlife crime. And I stumbled upon then the particular incident of abalone. But I would go so far as to say that if you're specifically looking for incidents of wildlife crime, look for the commodity that's being traded in. As Annette, I think you will echo, you mentioned, TikTok as being used as a source. So you will have to train the algorithm in the case of TikTok to look for, succulent trade, succulents, or even maybe mention the name of the plant. And then you will find it. But it's really a process of elimination because of the sheer scale of social media that we're working with. Also, then the other aspect that I just have to mention here, and I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, is the vast range of social media that we're dealing with. So either you need to, as in the case of Annette, pick a specific commodity and then research across social media spectrums, how each one, for example, WhatsApp groups, how they treat social media, or you will have to zone in on one particular social media and how that social media platform or app treats the trade in wildlife. But yes, it is out there and you will find it. You just have to look for it. Annette, would you like to weigh in on that, please?
Sure, Derica. I know that Melissa is running a project at the GI that looks into tracking wildlife on the internet. So I'm not going to say much about it because she's probably much better in a much better situation to inform us on what she's doing. But just to say, I mean, with whatever you do in terms of research, and I think, Derica, you were at pains to point it out, there are serious ethical considerations and dimensions to it. So, for example, for my PhD, I did some research in Facebook groups, but you have to reveal who you are unless you have a very special ethical clearance from your institution. I mean, I know that a lot of NGOs don't do ethics, but there are issues of going into a chat room and not revealing who you are. Certainly, as an academic, Derek and myself can't do it. A lot of others also can't do it. We're not law enforcers. Having said that, there are really interesting AI tools now that are being used by NGOs and by state authorities to track some of the wildlife deals that are going on. I think it's also quite important. I might not have emphasized it too much in my presentation, but just to say, there is the dark net where a lot of stuff happens that's that we don't even know about. So it's tours and all sorts of things. You can pretty much buy anything on the darknet. But what is so interesting with wildlife is that a lot of it, and I can't give metrics or exact numbers, does happen in the legal open space. Facebook market space is one of the biggest forums where basically wildlife products have been traded. There have been congressional hearings in the US with Facebook to actually get them to crack down. The same with Amazon. Like even Amazon was used for trading in wildlife products and many other platforms. A lot of them we don't necessarily have access to. I had a researcher working with me that looked at some of the Asian platforms where a lot of that business is going on as well. In the drug space, it's very interesting. I've got a colleague who's been looking at Telegram, how Telegram is being used to basically buy basically a whole shopping list is made available on these digital communication sort of channels. And then you order via Telegram, Signal, or WhatsApp, and the transportation will also be organized. So it's quite fascinating what is happening in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Melissa, I'm going to apologize. I was preaching to the converted. I didn't know. So maybe you were already aware of whatever I said. Melissa just gave another comment. Thank you for your input to both of you. I know my question was broad. I was interested if there were any connection between gangs and wildlife crime. And then Derek mentioned the abalone poaching. Could Annette reveal more about the PhD students' research on puff adders? Okay, Melissa, I take note of that. But there is another question for Annette from Marcia Ferry. So Annette, let's quickly deal with that question. I do have one for Giovanni as well, so let's deal with that question after it. And Melissa, we're then going to come back to Annette's PhD student. So the Marcia Ferry, she's from the European Union Drugs Agency. For Annette, does the smuggling of protected plants include psychoactive plants? You muted?
Sorry, I'm muted. I just realized it does. In South Africa, we haven't seen that much of it happening yet, but globally, we know of psychoactive plants being trafficked. Yeah, from especially South America, the huge sort of criminal networks involved. In South Africa, what we're aware of is the beyond succulents. I've been focusing now in my talk, I've been focusing on succulents, but we have cycads and a bunch of other species that are also being trafficked. So it's quite broad, and sadly, we don't talk about it a lot. There's the scientific term, we call it plant blindness. So a lot of the general public is not quite aware of the impact, the huge impact of plant trafficking. In South Africa, we used to say that cycads were the most trafficked wildlife species. I think at the moment we're probably looking at succulents being trafficked more, but we're still waiting for the latest stats on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Annette. We're going to get, as I said, Melissa, we're going to get to your one now. I just would like to, before we run out of time, ask Giovanni a question. Giovanni, I'm going to ask it to you, and I will type it in the chat as well. If you can give us maybe practical examples, what high-tech tools are mostly used by the mafia? I did put it in the chat.
Okay.
You can respond if you're ready.
Okay. Allora, so now the mafia organization use to cyber laundering, in particular to cryptovalute and maybe use of ET system. In general, recently, for example, there has been discussed about the correctness and legitimacy of infiltration by investigative authorities or secret service into the system of private individuals, institution, and other state. So in general, the mafia organization use all of cyberspace tools, all of cyberspace instruments. And in fact, my research can find to respond at the penal possibility instruments to permit the contrast the mafia infiltration in the cyber. In particular, so the mafia use the cyber laundering and the crypto values, the social media in particular to proselytism. In particular, the mafia use the social media to proselytism, in particular in the child, in the young, because they use more than adults the social media, and so I made this. This is the whole of cyberspace humans use the mafia. In fact, now another questions in the research world is it's possible to speak about cyber mafia or no. Respect to 416 bis, it's possible to respond to cyber mafia about 416 bis in Italian jurisdiction against the cyber organized crime.
Thank you very much for your response, Giovanni. I will give a quick comment on that. Also, from my research that I presented, we definitely see passive recruitment of gang members on social media platforms. As I've mentioned, the depiction of gang life as being very glamorous. In my case, in the research that I did, we still have to see the spillover of passive recruitment into active recruitment. But I think that's only a matter of time. But in my research, Giovanni, I did also come across in the Italian case of the Italian mafia where active recruitment will take place on social media, to conclude that comment. Annette, we do have one more to go, and that's if you want to elaborate on your PhD student. I know your student is also in the room, so it seems like you're going to speak on their behalf, if you can comment.
It feels a little bit wrong. I wish she could speak. It's Janine Heim. I put her details into the chat. So Janine has been doing wonderful research. She's been researching the puff adder, well, bitters trade. So it's broader than puff adders, trade between South Africa and Germany. And she's been going to trade fairs in Germany. She's interviewing people in South Africa at the moment, and has come up with really, really fascinating data. And a lot of it involves also zooming in. She uses a zooming in and zooming out methodology to kind of understand the broader market structures, how it all works, who's involved. And yeah, she's also been looking at the digital interface. So Melissa, definitely look out for Janine. Janine is still in Cape Town at the moment, so you might want to reach out to her as well. You can do that via me. And then just quickly, the general question that you asked, I mean, we have found connections between gangs and wildlife crime beyond abalone poaching. I mean, the abalone poaching, like Derek has said, is a very long story. It's been going on for decades, and there has been sort of quite an interesting trade exchange between Chinese networks and gangs from the Cape Flats. We now see that some of the Cape gangs have been involved, certainly in the plant business. We specifically focusing on my case study now, but gangs have been involved in a number of sort of wildlife crimes across South Africa and beyond the borders, stretching from small critters to the big charismatic species. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Annette. We have 5 minutes left, and I do have another question for Giovanni. I did try and put it in the chat, but I don't think I did it. Oh, there we go. So Giovanni, can you see the chat? This is a question.
Yes, one moment.
This is a question from Laura Jane Watkins. So let's give Giovanni a second to read it, and that will be the last response for this panel.
Okay, I read one moment.
Okay. Okay, so the administrators will start breathing down my neck quickly to wrap up the session. Giovanni, is this something that
Okay.
you can respond to in 2 to 3
Yes,
minutes?
yes.
Please do.
Okay. One moment. Okay. So, mutual legal assistance agreement, AMLA, is correct. It's correct. The object of the question. Yes, the mutual legal assistance agreement.
Yes.
Okay. RK, I maybe RK tools in gathering evidence in cross-border criminal investigation, including the cases against big tech company for organized crime and organized terrorism offense. These agreements allow judicial authorities in one country to request assistance from the authorities in another country in obtaining evidence, such as testimony, document, and digital data. And in my experience about this field, the effectiveness of such agreements depend on various factors. First factor, mutual recognition. European investigation order, for example, are based on the principle of mutual recognition, which obliges executing authorities to recognize and implement investigation requests as if they had been used by their own authorities. And the second one is the accelerated procedures. The new European regulation are trying to make these procedures more efficient, introducing specific deadlines for the recognition and execution of requests, such a maximum of 30 days to decide and 90 days to execute the request. The third one is cooperation between cooperation in international cooperation. Cooperation between countries is essential, especially when it comes to demonstrating that digital preserves the foreign authorities. In fact, often need to collaborate with technology service providers to obtain relevant data. And in summary, while mutual legal assistance agreements are powerful tools, their effectiveness depend on the speed and cooperation between the authorities involved, as well as the willingness of technology company to collaborate.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you for that response, and thank you for keeping it short yet very insightful and answering the question from the panelist or from the participant. Then I would like to end the session then by thanking Giovanni and Annette for your time. Thank you for your insight and sharing this with our participants. We had at one stage more than 50 people in the room, which I think shows the importance of this particular topic that we are working on. And then together to end, thank you also again to the organizers of this particular panel and also of the conference. We would have struggled to do it at this high level of success without your great assistance. We are very, very fortunate for you and grateful for your assistance. Thank you, everyone. I hope that we can connect
Thank
again
you.
on this platform.
Thank you for organizing, Dereka. Fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you for
my
the
pleasure.
organization.
Okay. Thanks you, everyone.
It's
Have
a
a good
very
day.
pleasure to discuss with you.